Are people basically good or basically bad? How you answer that question helps shape your politics. And Christianity offers an answer that's fairly nuanced, but also an answer we might kind of find unsatisfying. Hi everyone, my name is Rick. I'm part of the Center for Christian Civics, and on this channel we look at how the Christian faith should lead us to think, speak, and act differently in the public square. If you're looking around and you're seeing the way political polarization is tearing our communities apart, and you're looking for a better way to exist as a Christian in polarized times, then like this video, hit the subscribe button, click on the bell, do all the things you're supposed to do to get YouTube to keep showing you our videos, because we've got a bunch of them coming up that are going to be really helpful and really encouraging to you. For today, the big question we're going to talk about is, are people good or bad? We're also going to talk about whether you're liberal or conservative and why, and what those questions all have to do with each other. But let's start with how Christianity would answer that big question. And I get that saying how Christianity would answer any question is kind of a bold claim, especially this question. People have been working away at this question for thousands of years. If you look back through history, you've got secular philosophers and philosophers from other religions and Christian philosophers all saying that people are basically good. But you've also got secular philosophers and philosophers from other religions and Christian philosophers all saying that people are basically bad. For a while, the dominant point of view among the most enthusiastic and energetic Christians in the US was that people were basically good. Then for the last 70 years or so, thanks in part to the work of Reinhold Niebuhr and his philosophy of Christian realism being taken maybe farther than he meant for it to be taken, the dominant point of view among the most enthusiastic and energetic and vocal Christians in the US has been that people are basically bad. We saw how dominant this view was a week or two ago when this pastor in North Carolina, who's pretty prominent in the Reformed evangelical world, tweeted out that it was important for us all to remember that our fundamental identity is that we are sinners in need of a savior. So if Christians in a single culture are going back and forth on this question over time, can there really be a quote-unquote Christian answer to it? Now, I understand if you disagree with me, but I think there is. I just think that it's a tough answer to keep our heads wrapped around most of the time. Last week, we talked about the Christian story in 4 chapters: glorious creation, tragic fall, sacrificial redemption, and total restoration. Chapters 1 and 2 tell us that the answer to that big question, the answer to whether people are basically good or basically bad, is yes. People are both glorious and fallen at the same time. Chapter 1 is just the start of a bigger story, and chapter 2 is not the end of that story. The thing is, it's really, really easy for us to treat chapter 1 and chapter 2 like they're alternative stories to one another, instead of treating them like they're both part of the same story. Most of us are naturally predisposed to either find it easier to live in chapter 1 or easier to live in chapter 2. Either we kind of get on some fundamental level that the heavens declare the glory of God, or we kind of get on some fundamental level that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And whichever one we're better at actually helps shape our politics. It doesn't determine our politics all on its own, but it's definitely a big piece of that bigger puzzle. Way back when I was just starting out working in campaigns after college, I was talking with a pastor who had been a mentor to me, and he told me something I hadn't known. Before he went into ministry, he actually worked in DC on Capitol Hill as a Republican speechwriter in the Senate. And if you're going to work in politics, he told me, I'm going to tell you something that one of my mentors told me. Democrats don't believe in the fall, and Republicans think the fall was a good thing. That's maybe a funny or self-deprecating way for a Republican to describe his own team, but a Democratic communications strategist turned radio host ended up laying out the same idea in a similar way. He said that being liberal or conservative isn't a matter of where you stand on any particular issue. Some conservatives are very concerned about global warming. Some liberals oppose abortion. What makes people conservative or liberal is which story they believe at their core about the true nature of humans. Conservatives view the world as a dangerous and evil place, and believe people to be fundamentally selfish. Liberals view the world as a natural and harmonious place, and believe people to be fundamentally good. Again, this doesn't determine your partisan leanings all on its own, but it's a real part of it. If you're more inclined to recognize the glory of the world around you, then you're also more inclined to respond positively to the way progressives craft policy and messaging in the US. And because the world is glorious, you can and will find evidence to convince yourself that you're right. And if you're more inclined to recognize the brokenness of the world around you, you're also more inclined to respond positively to the way conservatives craft policy and messaging in the US. And because the world is fallen, you can also find evidence to convince yourself that you're right. Christianity, though, it invites us to inhabit a bigger story than the stories we would tell ourselves or the things that our culture would try to tell us. Part of the Christian life is learning to actually treat chapters 1 and 2 like they're both woven into the same bigger story. Learning to both celebrate God's glory as it's reflected in the works of his hands, including the people who bear his image, and learning to lament the deep, horrific tragedies of the fall wherever we encounter them, and doing those things at the same time. Learning to practice this kind of nuance, learning to get better at holding the truths from chapter 1 and the truths from chapter 2 in our hands together instead of just holding one at a time, is going to be a lifelong process for all of us. And it's a process that's usually easier to do with other people, but that's a whole bunch of other videos for a whole bunch of other days. In the meantime, which of these comes more naturally to you? Is it easier for you to see and respond to the glory? Or is it easier for you to see and lament the fallenness? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this week, and we'll see you again soon with more on how we can all think, speak, and act differently in the public square.